I heard my daughter scream before I even reached the backyard. My little girl was standing there, scared, shaking, and crying. Around her neck was an electric dog collar. Karen had put it on her to teach her a lesson, as she said. Karen stood close by, wearing her bright red jacket, holding the small remote in her hand. Her face looked angry and proud at the same time. "She must follow the rules," Karen said. "Disabled or not, this neighborhood listens to me." My daughter cried softly, "Dad, please help me." And then Karen pressed the remote, and my daughter let out a terrified scream. I ran forward to save her, but Karen shoved me hard and I fell to the ground. She thought I was just another neighbor. But what she didn't know: I'm the police chief. Before you hear what happened next, tell me where you were watching from. And don't forget to follow for more real HOA stories where justice always wins. I heard my daughter scream before I even reached the backyard. It wasn't a small cry or a scared whimper. It was a sharp, terrified scream that cut straight through the house and froze my entire body. I had never heard her scream like that before. My heart started pounding so fast it felt like my chest was shaking. I rushed toward the back door, pushing it open so hard it slammed against the wall behind me, and that's when I saw it. My daughter standing in the middle of our yard, shaking, crying, her little hands pressed against her chest. Around her neck was an electric dog collar. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with fear, and standing just a few feet away from her was HOA Karen. Red jacket, blonde hair, angry expression, and a small black remote in her hand like it gave her the power to control the entire world. She held it proudly, like she was doing something right instead of something terrifying. "She must follow the rules," Karen said, her voice sharp and cold. "Disabled or not, she listens to me." My daughter cried out again, "Dad, help me." Her voice broke my heart. I had never heard her sound so scared. Karen didn't turn around. She didn't see me coming closer. She didn't know who she had just threatened, because the father she was trying to control is the police chief. But before this moment, before the fear, before the scream, the day had started completely normal. Calm, warm, peaceful. The sun was shining, and the breeze was soft, carrying the smell of fresh grass across the yard. My daughter was sitting under the big tree with her favorite toy blocks, arranging them into small shapes only she understood. She wasn't loud. She wasn't bothering anyone. She never did. She was smiling softly, humming a small tune she made up herself. My wife was nearby, watering the flowers along the fence, stopping every few seconds to glance at our daughter with a smile. She loved seeing her play outside. It always made her heart lighter. Everything felt safe. Everything felt perfect. I stepped inside the house for a moment to answer a phone call from the police station. It was a simple update about a case. Nothing urgent, nothing dangerous. I told the officer I would look into it later and hung up. I was gone for less than 1 minute. But in that 1 minute, trouble walked into our backyard. Trouble with blonde hair and an attitude larger than the entire neighborhood. Trouble named Karen. She walked in without knocking, like she always did. Karen believed the whole neighborhood belonged to her. She believed every house, every yard, every flower, every blade of grass should follow her rules. And if someone didn't follow her rules, she became furious. She pushed open our side gate loudly, her heels hitting the ground hard as she marched forward with purpose. She didn't stop. She didn't ask. She didn't think. She walked straight toward my daughter. "What is she doing outside alone?" Karen snapped, her voice filled with judgment. My daughter looked confused, holding her toy block like a shield. She whispered, "My mom is right here." My wife turned around immediately. She stepped closer, her face already tense. "Karen, she's with me. She's safe. She's fine." But Karen didn't even look at her. She acted like my wife wasn't even there. "She is disabled," Karen said loudly, as if she was announcing something important. "She needs control. She needs supervision. This neighborhood must stay perfect." My wife's eyes widened. "Karen, stop. You're going too far." But Karen didn't stop. She reached into her bag and pulled out the dog collar. Black, silver, cold, and completely wrong. She held it up like it was something normal, something helpful, something she was proud to use. My wife gasped louder now. "Karen, no, put that down." But Karen just smiled, proud, stubborn, and dangerous. "It teaches discipline," she said calmly. Before my wife could react, Karen walked toward my daughter and placed the collar around her neck. My daughter froze, her eyes instantly filling with fear. Tears formed on her cheeks as she looked back at my wife, silently begging for help. "Take it off!" my wife shouted, stepping forward. But Karen tightened her hand around the remote and said, "Rules are rules. She will learn." The peaceful backyard we loved became a nightmare. Power replaced kindness. And then the scream came. The one that pulled me out of the house and into the moment that changed everything. She still didn't know who she was dealing with, but she was about to learn. Karen didn't knock. She never knocked. She pushed the side gate open with the same force she used on everyone in the neighborhood, like she owned the street, the yards, the houses, and even the people who lived inside them. Her heels hit the stone path with loud, sharp clicks, each step sounding like a warning before the storm. My daughter looked up from her small toy blocks and froze. Her hands stopped moving. Her eyes widened, confused and scared. She knew Karen's voice. She knew the anger in it. She knew the feeling of being watched and judged. "What is she doing outside alone?" Karen snapped, her tone full of disapproval. My daughter whispered in a soft voice, "My mom is right here." My wife turned around instantly. She stepped toward my daughter, positioning herself between her and Karen. Her face showed surprise first, then confusion, then anger building slowly. "She's not alone, Karen. I am right here," my wife said firmly. "She is safe." But Karen didn't care. Karen never cared about explanations, or facts, or the truth. She only cared about her rules, rules that she twisted however she wanted. "She is disabled," Karen said loudly, as if she was giving an official announcement. "Children like her need to be controlled. They cannot do whatever they want." My wife's hands tightened around the watering can. "Karen, stop. This is not your place," she said. But Karen's eyes weren't on my wife. They were locked on my daughter, cold, intense, almost calculating. "This neighborhood needs order," Karen continued. "You people break rules all the time. You let her outside without checking the HOA guidelines. You let her make noise. You let her play wherever she wants." My wife shook her head slowly, disbelief filling her eyes. "She's just a child," she said. "Let her be." But Karen just lifted her chin higher, her expression turning even more stubborn. "Rules apply to everyone, and I will not let one family ruin what I built here." Then Karen reached into her purse. My wife's breath hitched. She took a step forward. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. Karen didn't answer. She pulled out the electric dog collar, the same one that would soon turn our peaceful morning into chaos. The metal shined in the sunlight, its shape hard and cold. It looked wrong, out of place, dangerous. My wife gasped loudly. "Karen, what is that? Why do you have that?" But Karen didn't even blink. She held it up proudly, like she was showing off a new idea she was convinced would solve every problem. "This is a training tool," she said calmly. "It is for discipline. It keeps things in line. Your daughter needs this more than any dog in the neighborhood." My wife's voice cracked as she stepped forward. "Karen, no, put that away. That is not for children." Karen shook her head slowly. "You're too soft. You let her break rules. You let her be wild. She needs to learn her place." My daughter held her toy block against her chest tightly, like she was trying to protect herself from Karen's voice. My wife rushed to stand between them and said again, louder this time, "Karen, leave, right now." But Karen's eyes were full of something my wife couldn't fight, pride mixed with cruelty. She pushed past my wife, moving straight toward my daughter with the collar in her hand. "Karen, stop!" my wife shouted. She didn't even look at my wife. She knelt in front of my daughter, grabbed the collar with both hands, and held it up to her neck. My daughter's eyes filled with tears instantly. She froze, terrified, unable to understand why this woman was touching her. "She needs this," Karen said, "for her own good." My wife tried to pull Karen away, but Karen shoved her back with surprising force. "Don't touch my daughter!" my wife screamed. Karen didn't stop. She didn't listen. She fastened the collar around my daughter's small neck, while my wife cried out in shock and fear. My daughter whimpered, "Mom." But Karen held the remote tightly, her expression hard. "I warned you," she said calmly. "Now she will learn." My wife rushed forward again, her hands shaking. "Take it off! Karen, please, take it off!" Karen stepped away from both of them, the remote in her hand, her finger dangerously close to the button. You don't deserve to be in this community, Karen said. I will teach all of you how to follow rules. My daughter began to cry. My wife's eyes filled with fear and helplessness. And just then, just when everything felt like it was falling apart, Karen raised the remote higher as if she was about to show the whole neighborhood who was in charge. The entire yard felt silent. And then, I heard the scream, a scream so sharp and terrified that it tore through the air, tore through the peace, tore through my world. Inside the house, I dropped everything. I didn't breathe. And as I sprinted toward the backyard, I knew one thing. Karen had crossed a line she could never come back from. Karen stood in the middle of our backyard like she was the ruler of the world. Her red jacket glowed in the sunlight, her blonde hair stiff with hairspray, and her expression full of angry pride. She held the electric dog collar remote in her hand as if it was her personal tool for controlling people. My wife stood only a few feet away, breathing fast, her face filled with worry and disbelief. She kept glancing between Karen and our daughter, completely shocked that someone from the neighborhood, someone we saw almost every day, could do something so cruel. Karen's voice was calm, but her actions were anything but calm. She believed she was right. She believed she was fixing a problem. She believed she was protecting the neighborhood from a child who simply wanted to play with her toys in the sun. You don't listen to the rules, Karen said, looking at my wife with cold eyes. I see her outside every day. I hear her playing. I see her running around. That is not allowed here. My wife shook her head. She's not doing anything wrong, Karen. She's just a child. She's happy. She's safe. Karen rolled her eyes like my wife was a foolish student who didn't understand simple logic. She's disabled, Karen said sharply. She should be kept inside. You people don't follow proper HOA standards. You don't understand structure. My wife stepped forward again. Karen, please stop this. You're hurting her. Karen lifted the remote slightly, holding it like a threat. Only if she refuses to learn, she said. My daughter stood frozen, her little hands shaking, her eyes full of panic. She looked so small, so gentle, so confused. She didn't know why this woman was doing this. She didn't know why someone was angry at her for simply being outside. She whispered softly, "Mom, what did I do?" My wife's voice broke. "Nothing, sweetheart, you did nothing. I'm here. I'm right here." But Karen didn't hear any of this. Or maybe she heard it and didn't care. She stepped back a little, holding the remote tightly with both hands now, as if she was preparing for something. She kept her chin high, trying to look impressive, like she was showing the whole neighborhood what happens when people break her rules. "You need to understand something," Karen said, trying to keep her voice firm. "This neighborhood respects me. I keep everything perfect. I keep everything peaceful. I cannot let one child ruin that." My wife stared at her in disbelief. She's not ruining anything. She's just living her life. Karen shook her head slowly, disappointed, as if my wife had failed a test. "You are too soft. I have to do your job for you." Those words cut like knives. My wife's hands curled into fists. She took a deep breath, and she stepped forward again, this time with real fire in her eyes. "Karen, take it. Off." Karen smiled, a slow, cold smile. "No." She lifted the remote higher. My daughter took a small step backward, her breath catching in her throat. She held her toy block tight against her chest, trying to hide behind it as if it could protect her. The air became heavy. The birds stopped singing. Even the wind stood still, waiting. Karen tightened her grip on the remote. "This is the only way she will learn." My wife lunged forward to grab the remote, but Karen moved too quickly. She stepped aside, pushed my wife's shoulder, and held the remote even tighter. "Don't touch me," Karen snapped. "You don't respect authority." "You're not authority," my wife shouted back. "You're just a bully." Karen ignored her. She stared at my daughter, a cold stare full of judgment and anger. "This neighborhood needs discipline," she said, "and I will bring it." My wife looked around desperately, her breathing sharp and fast. She needed help. She needed someone to stop this. But she was alone in that moment, alone with fear, alone with helplessness, alone with a woman who thought she was above everyone. "No one is coming to save you," Karen said to my wife with a proud smirk. "No one stops me." She raised the remote again. My daughter backed away, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. Karen's finger hovered over the button. Then, a sound cut through the air. Not a scream, not a cry, but the sound of footsteps. Fast, angry, powerful footsteps hitting the ground behind the house. Karen didn't turn around. She didn't even look. She didn't know those footsteps belonged to me. She didn't know I was already running toward the backyard. She didn't know that the moment she crossed that line, I was seconds away. My wife let out a breath she had been holding for too long. She looked toward the house, her eyes widening with hope. Karen still didn't notice. "Time to learn," she said quietly, lifting the remote higher. But she didn't know she was no longer the strongest person in the yard. The police chief was coming, and nothing would stop him. Inside the house, I heard it, a scream so sharp, so full of fear, that it felt like it sliced straight through the walls and into my chest. It wasn't the kind of cry a child makes when they fall or get scared. It was deeper, louder, desperate, the kind of scream that makes a parent move faster than they ever thought possible. My heart froze for half a second. Then it exploded into motion. I just ran. My shoes slid across the floor as I rushed to the back door, grabbing the handle so hard it almost broke. I threw it open with all my strength and sprinted into the yard. The sunlight hit my eyes for just a moment, but even through the brightness, I saw everything clearly. Clearer than anything I had ever seen. My daughter stood in the middle of the yard, her small body shaking, tears falling down her cheeks, her hands trembling near her chest. Her face was red from crying, her eyes wide with terror. She looked so small, so fragile, like a tiny bird trapped in a storm. My wife stood beside her, desperately trying to reach the remote in Karen's hand. Her voice was broken, raw from shouting at Karen to stop. And then there was Karen, standing tall, standing proud, standing cruel. She held the small black remote with a twisted smile, her finger pressed lightly on the button as if she enjoyed having that power. Her red jacket glowed under the sun, matching the anger and arrogance on her face. She didn't see me yet. She didn't know I was there. She didn't know I was coming, but she was about to find out. I started running across the yard, calling my daughter's name. "Sweetheart, I'm here." My daughter turned her head just enough to see me. Her eyes filled with something new. Hope. She stretched her hands toward me, crying louder. But Karen reacted faster, not with regret, but with anger, pure, sharp anger. She whipped her head around just enough to see me moving toward her, and instead of stopping, instead of dropping the remote, instead of realizing everything she had done wrong, she pressed the button. My daughter screamed again, a sound that ripped through my soul. My wife fell to her knees, reaching for her, crying, "Stop! Karen, stop!" But Karen didn't stop. She didn't even blink. She held that remote like she was holding a crown. Then, in the next second, she spun around and shoved me with both hands. Her push was surprising, not because it was strong, but because it came from someone who didn't understand what she was doing. She pushed me like she had the right to, like she had power over me, like I was someone she could treat the same way she treated my daughter. I stumbled backward and hit the ground hard. Dust flew up around me. For a moment, all I saw was sunlight and shadows spinning above me. Karen stood over me, her red jacket glowing like a warning light. "Stay out of this," she shouted. "You don't tell me what to do." She still didn't know who she had pushed. She still didn't know who she was shouting at, but she was going to find out, and soon. I pushed myself up slowly, feeling anger rise inside me like fire. My vision sharpened, my breath steadied, my hands curled into fists without me noticing. My wife crawled toward our daughter, trying to loosen the strap around her neck. Her hands were shaking too much. She kept glancing at me, her eyes begging me to do something, anything. My daughter looked at me through tears, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, help." And that was it. The moment the police officer in me awoke with full force. I stood tall, stepping forward slowly, every muscle ready. My eyes were locked on Karen. She took one tiny step back, confusion creeping into her face. "You need to leave," she said, trying to sound strong. "You're breaking the rules. I'm in charge here, not you." Her voice cracked slightly, just slightly, but enough for me to hear the fear beginning. "You think you can come into my neighborhood," Karen continued, "and ignore the HOA? You think your family can break every rule we have? Your daughter is disabled. She needs control." I stepped closer. Karen stepped back. Another small step, another tremble in her voice. You can't scare me," she said. "I'm the HOA president. I run this place." I took one more step forward. close enough that she could see her own reflection in my eyes. She looked confused now, worried, nervous. "What are you doing?" she demanded. But before I answered, the sound that followed changed everything. Sirens, faint at first, then louder, sharper, closer. Karen looked toward the street, her hands shaking. What is that? Who called them?" I didn't take my eyes off her. "You did," I said quietly. "When you crossed the line." Karen swallowed hard. "What line?" "I didn't do anything wrong." I stepped even closer, and this time she didn't step back. She froze. Because now, she finally saw something she had missed the whole time. She saw the badge clipped to my belt. Golden, shining, authority. Her mouth fell open. No, you're not." "I am," I said. Calm, clear, unshaking. "I'm the police chief." Karen's face turned white. The remote slipped from her hand. Her confidence melted like ice in sunlight, and for the first time since she walked into my yard, she was afraid. Karen's face twisted as the sirens grew louder. The sound echoed through the neighborhood, bouncing between the houses, growing sharper with every passing second. She looked from me to the street, then back to the remote that lay on the ground near her feet. For the first time since she entered my yard, she looked unsure, truly unsure. "You're lying," Karen whispered, her voice shaking. "You're lying to scare me." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I simply lifted my jacket a little higher so the light could shine directly on the badge clipped to my belt. The badge that had stopped criminals, calmed riots, and protected families for years. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. You're really the police chief?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "Yes," I said quietly. "And you just crossed the biggest line of your life." Karen blinked fast, like she was waking up from a dream, or a nightmare. She looked down at her hands, then at the remote on the grass, then finally at my daughter, who was still shaking in my wife's arms. "No," Karen said softly, shaking her head like she wanted to erase reality. "This isn't. I didn't mean. I wasn't trying to." She stepped backward, one foot sliding against the dirt. Then she turned slightly, as if she was considering running toward her house. But I took one firm step forward, and she froze again. "You don't get to walk away from this," I said. Karen swallowed hard. "I was just enforcing the rules," she whispered. Her voice was so thin it almost broke in the air. "She broke HOA policy. She can't just play wherever she wants. She can't be outside unless what?" I interrupted sharply. "Unless she's perfect enough for you?" Karen's mouth opened, but she had no words. "You terrorized my daughter," I said, my voice low but steady. "You scared her, you ignored my wife, you ignored her tears, you came into our yard like you owned it." Karen shook her head quickly. No, I didn't. I was correcting behavior. That's my job as HOA president." "Your job," I repeated slowly, stepping closer, "is to manage lawns, parking spaces, trash pickup. You don't get to put a collar on a child. You don't get to tell families how to live. You don't get to hurt innocent people and call it rules." Karen's hands began to shake visibly now. She glanced at the street again. The sirens were almost here, so close that you could hear the rumble of engines underneath them. "I didn't hurt her," Karen shouted suddenly, as if raising her voice would make it true. I just wanted her to listen. She never listens. None of you ever listen." Her voice cracked with desperation. She pointed at my daughter, her hand trembling. She runs around, she makes noise. She doesn't stay inside, she's different. It's disruptive. I'm trying to protect the neighborhood." My wife's voice finally cut through the tension. "You were trying to control her," she said, holding our daughter close. "Because she's disabled, because she's different. You punished her for existing." Karen turned wildly toward my wife. "You're lying," she screamed. "I was doing what any leader would do." "Leaders protect people," my wife said sharply. "They don't hurt children." Karen's breath grew fast and uneven. She turned back to me, eyes filling with something close to panic. "You have to understand," she stammered. "I didn't mean to cross a line. I didn't mean to upset anyone. I'm stressed. I'm tired. I'm the only one who follows the rules around here. Everyone else, stop," I said firmly. Karen went silent instantly. "I don't want excuses," I said. "I want accountability." The sirens roared right outside the gate now. 2 police cars pulled up, tires crunching against gravel. The lights flashed red and blue across the yard, painting the trees and grass in colors of authority. Karen stared at them like she was watching her whole world crumble. The officers stepped out, walking quickly into the yard. "Chief?" one of them said, "Surprised to see me. We got a call about a situation involving a minor." I stepped aside so he could see the collar still around my daughter's neck. The officer's eyes widened in horror. His partner's jaw tightened. Both officers turned to Karen at the same time. "Ma'am," the first officer said, voice firm but controlled, "please step away from the child." Karen's voice broke. I didn't mean, I'm the HOA president. I have authority." The officer shook his head. "Not this kind of authority." Karen took a step back, her legs shaking. This is all a misunderstanding," she whispered. "I was enforcing rules." "Enforcing rules," the second officer repeated coldly, "does not involve using control devices on a child. Ever." Karen stared at both officers, then looked at me, then at my daughter, and for the first time since she entered my yard, she realized she was not the one in control. She was trapped, exposed, finished. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Please, I didn't mean to. I didn't know." "You didn't know," I said, stepping closer, "because you never cared enough to ask. You never cared enough to understand. You only cared about power." Karen's lip trembled. The officer stepped behind her and said, "Karen Blake, you are under arrest for unlawful harassment, endangerment of a minor, and trespassing." Karen gasped, No, you can't. I'm the HOA president. I decide the rules. But her words didn't matter anymore. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Her power, the power she believed she owned, vanished in an instant. She looked at me one last time, tears finally forming in her eyes. "Please, I didn't know who you were." I met her eyes and said softly, "You didn't need to know who I was. You just needed to know right from wrong." Karen lowered her head as the officers guided her toward the police car. For the first time, she stayed quiet. Karen didn't fight when the officers finally took hold of her arms. She didn't scream anymore. She didn't argue or lecture or wave her clipboard like a weapon of power. She just stood there, trembling, staring at the ground as if she didn't understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The red jacket she wore, the symbol of her authority, her pride, suddenly looked too bright, too loud, too out of place. She no longer looked like the HOA president. She looked like someone who had finally realized how far she had crossed the line. The officers moved her away from the yard slowly. Her shoes scraped against the ground. She kept her head down, her shoulders shaking with shallow breaths. Behind her, the quiet neighborhood had come alive. Dozens of eyes peeked through windows. Curtains moved. Front doors opened slightly. Faces appeared behind fences. Everyone in the neighborhood had heard the sirens. Everyone heard the shouting. Everyone saw the flashing lights reflecting off their walls. And now they were watching Karen, the woman who controlled their lawns, their parking spaces, their garbage bins, their paint colors, being led away in handcuffs. Some neighbors gasped. Some whispered quietly. For years they had been afraid of her rule book that she used to punish anyone who didn't follow her exact instructions. But now she looked like a person who had finally been stopped. The officers reached the patrol car and opened the back door. Karen hesitated, turning around for one last look at me. Her eyes weren't angry anymore. They weren't proud. They weren't full of authority. They were full of fear, real, human fear. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I didn't know who you were." I stepped forward slowly, my daughter still in my arms. Her small hands clung to my shirt, her face buried against my chest, still shaking from everything she had been through. "You didn't need to know who I was," I said quietly. "You just needed to know right from wrong." Karen looked down, her lip trembling. For a moment she looked like a lost child, confused, ashamed, scared. But the officers guided her inside the car. The door shut. Just like that, her reign over the neighborhood ended. The patrol car pulled away, the lights dimming as it reached the end of the street. The sound of the engine faded slowly, leaving behind complete silence. A silence that felt like the first real breath our home had taken in a long time. My wife ran to me, tears streaming down her face. She wrapped her arms around me and our daughter, holding both of us so tightly it felt like she would never let go. "She's okay," I whispered to her. "She's safe." But tears kept falling from her eyes. She brushed my daughter's hair gently and kissed the top of her head, whispering, "I am here. I'm here. Mommy's here." My daughter finally lifted her face from my chest. Her cheeks were wet, her eyes red, but there was something new in her expression: relief. She stared at me for a moment, then reached out and hugged my neck tightly. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but she wasn't crying anymore. She was just holding on. I held her closer. My hands shook slightly, from anger, from fear, from the shock of what almost happened. But I didn't let go. I didn't want to. I wanted her to feel safe again, even if it took hours. We stood there like that, the three of us, in the warm sunlight. A breeze moved through the yard. The leaves of the big tree rustled softly. The air felt different now. Safer, cleaner, lighter. My wife finally stepped back a little, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I can't believe she did this," she said, voice shaking. "She won't do it again," I said firmly. "Not to us. Not to anyone." Neighbors slowly began stepping out of their houses, some walking toward us hesitantly, others stopping at their fences. They looked unsure, like they were deciding whether it was okay to speak. Finally, Mrs. Carter, an older woman from 3 houses down, approached us. Her voice was soft. "I'm so sorry," she said. We were always scared of her. She bullied everyone. We wanted to stop her, but we didn't know how." Another neighbor nodded. "She fined us for everything. We felt trapped." A man from across the street added quietly, "She even yelled at my kids for playing outside." They all looked at us, not with pity, but with gratitude. For the first time, they were saying out loud what everyone had been afraid to say for years. "You did the right thing," Mrs. Carter said. "Thank you." I nodded, holding my daughter closer. "We just want peace," I said. "A safe neighborhood, for everyone." And in that moment, it felt like the entire street finally breathed again. Like the fear that had lived here for so long had finally been pushed out. My daughter leaned her head against my shoulder, her voice small. "Dad, are we okay now?" I kissed her forehead gently. "We're more than okay," I whispered. "You're safe, you're home, and I'm here. No one will ever hurt you again." The sunlight warmed her face. Her breathing grew calm. Her small hand loosened slightly around my shirt. My wife took my other hand, squeezing it tightly. The nightmare was over. The danger was gone. The family was together. And for the first time since the scream, the world felt right again.